He sat on death row for 30 years before being released from prison as an innocent man. In 1985, Ray Hinton was wrongly convicted of murdering 2 people in Birmingham, Alabama.
According to the Equal Justice Initiative, he is the 152nd person to be exonerated from death row since 1983. For 60 Minutes, Scott Pelley explored the difficult road that followed Hinton after his release in April.
That's when Ray Hinton stepped out of the shadow of execution, taking the first steps that he chose for himself since 1985.
What was that moment like?
As though I was walking on clouds.
Over with. Over with.
I wanted to get away in case they changed their mind, you know.
You still didn't believe it?
I was not going to allow myself to really believe that I was free until I was actually free.
Free to visit his mother, who went to her grave believing her son would be executed. The cemetery was Hinton's first destination, and he was startled by a world that had moved on without him.
We headed toward the graveyard, and a voice come on and said, at 2 point so many miles, turn right. And I said, what the hell? Who is that? And he said, it's GPS tracker. I knew I didn't see no white lady get in that car. I wanted to know, how did she get in that car? And what is she doing in this car? Man, come on.
Any voice tended to be a surprise. On death row, Hinton spent most of every day alone.
After 30 years inside, mostly by yourself, did you worry about coming back out into the world?
You get out and you're just out. If you don't have a place to live or money or whatever, you ask yourself what I'm gonna do. But my best friend stuck by me for 30 years, and he had already told me, whenever you get out, you come live with me and my wife.
What did you have to learn after you got out?
I'm still learning. I'm still learning that I can take a bath every day. I'm still learning that I don't have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and eat breakfast. I'm still learning that life is not always what we think it is.
Henry Schuster, the 60 Minutes producer behind this story, joins us now. Thank you so much for being here. Such a powerful story. How did he end up in prison in the first place?
The Birmingham area police, there had been one fast food manager who was shot and wounded, and then 2 more who were murdered. And they were looking. They were under a tremendous amount of pressure. This was a huge crime. They were under a tremendous amount of pressure to solve this. He was found, Ray Hinton had been convicted of theft a few years earlier, so his picture was in a, in a book of, it was in a photo lineup. And the fast food manager who was wounded picked him out of that lineup. Now, for that particular crime, he had timesheets showing he was at a warehouse miles away working. Yeah, witnesses, didn't matter. So they claimed that they had a ballistics evidence, a gun, which they found at his mother's house, where Ray was living, and he was arrested, and he was convicted because what the Supreme Court would later say, inadequate counsel. He and his lawyer was given $1,000 for expert witnesses, and one of the expert witnesses he hired was a civil engineer. This was their ballistics guy, blind in one eye, didn't really know how to operate the machinery when he went to the state crime lab, and the prosecution just tore him up on cross-examination. And Ray Hinton says that's when he knew he was going to be convicted. Didn't believe it until then, but that's when he knew he was going to be convicted.
So how was the state's case against him discredited? And has anyone apologized? It's just unimaginable to think about what he has gone through.
Well, first, nobody has apologized. The state's case was discredited. Brian Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative, Brian Stevenson took up Ray's case, and for 16 years he appealed at every level. They lost by 1 vote on the Alabama Supreme Court. He took it to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they ruled 9-0 that Ray Hinton needed a new trial because he had had inadequate defense, and so it was sent back down to the state of Alabama, and that's when they finally did what Brian Stevenson had been asking for 16 years, which was test the weapon. As soon as they tested the weapon, Ray Hinton was out within the week.
Wow. We've seen other people accused wrongly who are released, but this is different. He had a best friend that stuck by him for 30 years. How critical was that for him?
Well, you know, that's critical in a way that we can't even imagine, because one of the things that we learned from this piece and doing our investigation around this is that maybe 2 or 3 states in the country help the wrongfully convicted when they're released from prison. Now, a lot of states, 30 out of 50 states, have laws that eventually say you can apply for compensation. But almost no state helps these people when they walk out. So when Ray Hinton walked out, he was incredibly fortunate because he had his best friend to give him a place to live. And his attorneys, Brian Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative, I mean, think about this. Ray Hinton had never seen an ATM. He didn't know what a smartphone was, didn't know what a laptop was. Think about 30 years of technology that have passed him by. And one of the other people that we profile in the piece describes it as like being in a coma. And this guy, who is now amazingly on the Connecticut Board of Pardons and Paroles, you show him a smartphone and he just stares at it. He says, I can't believe you have all of the world's knowledge at your fingertips. Just can't imagine that, because, you know, 20 years, 30 years in prison, these are things that, you know, it is, like he said, being in a coma.
Wow, so incredibly powerful. We look forward to seeing the rest of it. 60 Minutes producer Henry Schuster, thank you so much.
You can watch Scott Pelley's full report, produced by Henry Schuster, this weekend on 60 Minutes. Scott will also take a look at the debate over compensating those who've been exonerated. That's Sunday evening at 7, 6 Central, only on CBS.